Yeah, let me just enter these speaker cards really quick. Thanks.
If not, I have this card to put in. I hope it's not too late. No. How do you know what's going on in the closed sessions?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to, yeah. The closed sessions should be open. There should. That's another one of my little gripes. They did the whole deal with this destruction of the golf course. Closed session with
I
the
just wanna
city manager. Like, oh.
We have one, two. I think they're speaking. Closed session? I think this is closed session. Okay. So far we have one, two regular business items. We have one, two, three. Three. I want to check with. Can you double check with Mr. Franco? It needs to be specific, a specific item on the agenda for closed session. Yeah. Do them all? Yeah, we don't have that many. Yeah. Okay, I'm taking general comments. Sorry? Okay, fine. Let me just look at it. Did Margot submit a card? Where is that at? Oh, I'm sorry. Are we missing a number 6? I have a 5 and I don't have a 6. Oh, is that Franco? Okay. Let's just try to flag him when he's ready. Yeah. Are you guys ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Okay, Mary's ready to go live. We're live.
good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Montebello City Council meeting of March 1st. I am calling this meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. If you will please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. And Mayor Pro Tem Peralta, if you can lead us in the pledge. And please remain standing for the invocation by our Deputy City Clerk.
We are thankful for this day that you have given us, for its blessings, its opportunities, its challenges. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us. We pray for strength and guidance for each day as it comes, for each day's duties, for each day's problems. May we be challenged to give our best always, and may we be assured of your presence with us. Amen.
Ms. Fernandez, if you can please call the roll.
Yes, Councilmember Melendez,
Here.
Councilmember Tamayo,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Peralta,
Present.
Councilmember Jimenez, Mayor Torres.
Here. Thank you very much. We are going to be taking closed session, regular session, public comments at the same time this evening. Ms. Fernandez? And Mr. City Attorney, if you can please read the statement of public oral communications.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. At this time, the general public may only address the City Council during the special meeting on items which have been described in the notice of the special meeting in accordance with Government Code Section 54954.3, subsection A. Please be aware that the maximum time allotted for members of the public to speak on shall not exceed 3 minutes per person. State law prohibits the City Council from taking action or entertaining extended discussion on a topic not listed on the agenda. Please show courtesy to others and direct all your comments to the mayor.
The first speaker is Rosa Tamayo. Following Rosa Tamayo is Tila Gregorian. I'll try.
Alicia, ponte el gorro, por favor.
Un momento, por favor. Está bien.
¿Ok? ¿Ya? Soy Rosa Tamayo y buenas noches a Mayor David Torres y miembros del Consejo.
My name is Rosa Tamayo. Good evening, Mayor Torres and City Council.
Yo soy una activista comunitaria y también me considero una persona que a veces soy ingeniera de resolver problemas financieros.
I consider myself a community activist, and I consider myself a person who aids for those that are blind.
Y tuve el gusto de trabajar hace un tiempo con el mayor David Torres y Scarlett Peralta.
I had the opportunity to work some time ago with Mayor David Torres and Mayor Pro Tem Peralta.
Y en ese tiempo yo pude resolver problemas financieros con ustedes dos.
And in
Pero
that time, I was able
ahora
to resolve financial problems with you two.
yo pienso que ustedes y los tres, señora también concejal Georgina Tamayo, y ustedes tres, no están actuando de buena fe.
I believe that you two, actually you three, including Councilmember Tamayo, are not acting in good faith.
Este gobierno es un gobierno demócrata
This government is a democratic government.
y como tal tienen que respetar
And with
a
that said,
todos
you
los
have to respect
empleados
to all employees.
y tienen que tener una justa causa
And you have to have a just cause
para sus razones.
for your reasoning.
Pero yo no sé si tienen razones de interés personal,
But I don't know if you have interests for personal interests.
porque a lo que se parece es que si les deben ustedes a alguien por su problema de, ah, de la campaña política
If you owe
financiera
someone for your political
y tienen que
campaign
pagar para atrás,
and you have
pues
to repay
ese es
back,
problema de ustedes,
that would be your problem.
pero no es problema que nos estén haciendo a nosotros los habitantes de la ciudad de Montebello.
But it's not a problem that you should put on the citizens of Montebello.
No están siendo leales, no están trabajando con lealtad.
You're not
Y a mí
being loyal.
eso me enoja mucho,
And that angers me very much.
porque yo también tengo mis metas y mis batallas que las escojo yo también.
Because I also have my goals and my battles that I choose myself.
Y esta administración
And this administration
tiene que trabajar para nosotros, los miembros de esta ciudad.
has to work for us, the members of this
Y
city.
ya se los dije, no son los dueños de esta ciudad.
And I've already told you, you are not the owners of the city.
Tienen que actuar de buena fe y no lo están haciendo de buena fe.
You have to act on good faith, and you're not acting on good faith.
Pongan atención, porque la gente ya no está, no está de acuerdo con lo que ustedes están haciendo.
Pay attention, because the citizens are not
Dejen a los empleados
are not
hacer
happy
su
with what you're
trabajo.
doing. Please let the employees do their job. Ya se terminó el tiempo.
¿Mande?
Ya se terminó el tiempo.
Valga que poquito. Ok, thank you.
Next speaker is Tila Gregorian, followed by California City Managers Foundation.
Tila Gregorian. My address is on file. I am here to advise you not to do what you're planning on doing tonight and firing Renee Bomandia, because we, the people of the community, have been very happy with our city manager. And you're doing an injustice for wanting to even thinking about firing him. That is not the best interest of our community, and I would say it would not be the best interest of you. You might not like him, but that has no importance here, whether you like someone or not. He's done a very good job for our city, the best city manager that we've had in a very long time. And he has worked with very, very difficult council members. So I think you need to allow him a little, or give him a little appreciation for his work that he's done for our community. And I can also tell you that if you fire Renee, that we will do a recall on those that will vote to fire him. And believe me, it will happen. Because we, the community, are very unhappy with 3 of you in this council. And I think you know who you are, the 3 that vote together all the time. And Tamayo, I'm so sorry to see you in that position. You need to start thinking for yourself and deciding what it is that you're going to vote for. Vote your own thoughts and what your heart tells you to vote. Do not follow a bad leader, as our city manager is at this time. Those 2 have not done well for our city. I'm talking about David and Scarlett. They are in for their own purpose. And I would also like to suggest that both of you go out and get a job and be productive in our city instead of living on handouts and having people buy your vote. That is not what our city's about. We have never had this problem in our city before. So I truly believe that you have got to do an inventory of your lives and try to live a more productive life. Get out there and find a job LLC? Oh, yeah, right. That pays you what donations you get. This is ridiculous that two grown people do not have jobs. Good luck in being hired somewhere.
Next speaker is California City Managers Foundation.
I was asked to read the statement. On behalf of the California City Management Foundation, I'd like to provide our steadfast support to our colleague in Montebello, Renee Bobadilla. At the December 21st special council meeting, Mayor Pro Tem Scarlett Peralta stated openly on the dais that she would like to temporarily pause the recruiting process and create an ad hoc process to be developed and implemented prior to the hiring or firing of assistant chief position that were currently underway. This statement came after she was informed by the city manager of the problematic nature of the request. These statements can clearly be seen and heard in your publicly posted video recording of this meeting. Though she explained her intentions were not to usurp the city manager's authority, the context of the discussion would indicate otherwise. We believe this is exactly what would happen. Adoption of such a policy would not only violate the municipal code and the city manager's employment contract agreement, it clearly undermines the city manager's ability to hire a highly qualified person and reputable employee. Employees report to the city manager, not the city council. If employees felt obligated to the panel of the community members chosen by the city council to hire them, there's a problem for disloyalty and insubordination. Montebello's council has a city council, city manager form of government, which provides authority for a city manager to hire and recruit for positions within the city. Additionally, the city manager's employment agreement gives exclusively the authority for hiring. In other words, he can develop the best means necessary to fulfill the positions in the city. On the hand, the Montebello municipal code limits the city council's authority to hire two positions, the city manager and city attorney. A policy dictating on how police and fire chiefs and assistant chiefs are hired oversteps their authority, and it's a complete breach of that code. California City Management Foundation's mission is to support excellence in the city management, and we urge that the Montebello City Council to reject the Mayor Pro Tem Peralta's policy and allow the city manager to perform his duties as authorized. Ken Polowski, Executive Director, California City Management Foundation.
Ms. Nicholas, if you can just please clarify, are you a representative of the California
No,
City
I
Manager?
was sent an email and asked to read the statement.
Okay, if the record can just please reflect that Ms. Linda Nicholas is reading a statement that was emailed to council.
Oh, may I insert one more thing? Mr. Torres? The ACLU will be reviewing our council meetings from this time forward because there's a problem with the letter that was sent to the city from the ACLU. It was never sent by them, so they're investigating. But they're watching our meetings from now on to make sure that our First Amendment rights are protected. So am I allowed to speak now? Or is that, I don't mind if you want to just let this be that's fine.
Yeah, I believe you used your time to speak this evening. Thank you.
That's fine. But I concur with whatever other speaker said. We will recall. We help you get in, and we will get you
Ms. Nicholas, your
out.
time has expired. Thank you.
Next speaker is Elva Gomez, following with Edward Franco.
I'm here on behalf of my son. He couldn't come, he was really sick, but he wanted to make sure that I spoke on his behalf. It says, "Dear City Council and planners, I'm here representing my son, resident of District 3, who was sick and couldn't be here. He would like to bring up the following for your consideration. Item 1, as a resident of District 3, I ask the council to imagine Whittier Boulevard and Beverly Boulevard as more than roads connecting neighboring towns like Pico Rivera and Whittier to downtown LA. We have an opportunity here with our general plan update to prioritize our residents and create attractive, inviting, and pedestrian-centered street escapes. Pedestrian-centered streets are not only good for business and city revenues, they also improve the lives of city residents. We can look to nearby examples like the rehabilitation effort in downtown Lancaster that effectively doubled tax revenues between 2007, before the project began, and 2012. Since then, development and business in the area continues to boom. The city of Lancaster transformed their downtown into a charming and walkable environment throughout multiple measures. These measures include transforming lanes into the middle of the road, transforming lanes in the middle of the road into a mix of tree-shaded areas for pedestrians and parking buffered by trees. They also widen sidewalks, which ultimately narrowed the roads, slowed traffic, and reduced noise pollution from speeding vehicles. We can look to Uptown Whittier, which has a similar charm because their street design prioritizes pedestrians over vehicles. We've already had success with Boulevard Market because it's an open-air hideaway from the noisy speeding vehicles on Whittier Boulevard. It also succeeded in spite of not having a parking lot. I also asked the council to look at the Culver City Council's decision to eliminate parking mandates citywide this past year, following in the steps of cities like Sacramento, Berkeley, and Alameda, who have done the same. Through their investigations, these cities concluded that parking minimums are costly, promote and are expensive car-centric culture, and prevent affordable housing development. In summary, I asked the council to consider planning for pedestrian-centered street escapes that would both boost city revenues and improve the safety and quality of life for residents. Sorry. It's over. Thank you. Thank you. I missed the last part. It'll be quick. He's gonna kill me.
Yeah, if there's one more sentence, you can finish your
Okay.
comment.
Describe setbacks. Here, currently our zoning requirements require a minimum of 20-foot setbacks in the front yard of a priority for all residential zones, including higher density zones. As we draft our zoning code updates, we can make sure to address the misalignment between promoting infill development in higher density residential zones and the unutilized land reserved for setbacks. One possible solution would be reducing setbacks by 10 or 15 feet in our higher density residential zones. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez.
Next speaker is Edward Franco, followed by Margot Iser.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, and staff. I was going to write something down, but I just, you know, I'm sad that I'm here because word has it that you guys want to fire Renee Bobadilla, the city manager. I've heard, whether it's true or not, that Mayor Pro Tem Peralta literally face up said that she's going to fire him. I don't know if this is true or not, but from what I'm seeing, it seems like it's true. Now, some of you have straight out said, you know, he's doing a great job, he's doing good. Now, mind you, this is said in front of cameras, but then when you go behind closed doors, you start working on getting rid of them. I mean, just yesterday we had a groundbreaking and everybody praised the work that he did, that it was because of him that Topgolf is here. Now, others wanted to take the credit for it, but we all know the fact is that if it wasn't for Renee Bobadilla, the city manager, that wouldn't have happened. We've had other projects that had been sitting around for a while that have tried to get done, and it wasn't until our city manager got here that they actually got done. Now, you've got people that are talking that if this goes through, if it actually happens, that they're planning on recalling you guys. And, you know, Councilwoman Tamayo, unfortunately, you're getting kind of dragged into this because you're voting on their side. As the previous speaker said, I hope you vote your conscience and, go with what you believe is right. But we all are very much in support of our city manager. I've spoken to many business owners and many residents, and they're all happy with what he's done. We're finally in the black. We finally got money. We've got an excellent team, staff. If the city manager leaves, I'm hearing a lot of them are gonna go, and this city's gonna go down. If that's what you wanna be remembered for, Mayor, then I guess you can let it happen. Because if this happens on your watch, it's gonna be on you, really. So hopefully that's not the case, but if it does happen and they do put the recall, my signature's on it. So please do the right thing, and if it happens, I guess we'll find out next week. Thank you.
Next speaker is Margot Iser, followed by Joella Valdez.
Good evening. I am Margot Iser. I live in District 2. The two items about the general plan and the Montebello specific plan for downtown are the ones I'm talking about. The first one is that the general plan must include and strictly be enforced an open space, park, et cetera, element. And the decisions to be made should be made by all the different people. And that would include designating what remains of the municipal golf course as the entire area that's remaining all around be designated as a public park, because we're a park-poor city, and we would need that. We could use that space, have it designated as an open space recreation area for exercise and all these things that parks and open space do for people, and that would benefit everybody in every district. And I would like that to be included in the general plan immediately. That the other ideas of putting, well, let's not even mention it because there's other places for that. The second part is the Montebello specific plan downtown area. That is a historic area, and some of those buildings do need to have an historic preservation element in there so that they aren't defaced or they aren't necessarily remembering the history of Montebello and how it used to be. But there is a complaint that, oh, there's not enough parking, that you can't have a restaurant where Jimmy's used to be. The way to solve that might be, and I think it could be designated, that build in the back multi-level parking structures. Even if there's going to be pedestrians, there'll still be cars, and you could have and the money from that could come from stopping the totally expensive, extremely expensive, totally unnecessary and totally mutilating and wrong trimming of the trees every year, absolutely the wrong season. It destroys the habitat. We could stop that, and in fact, money that's used for that horribly expensive project could be used to build some multi-level parking structures behind the downtown main street. And I think we would be benefiting the environment, we'd be benefiting the people, we'd have shade, we'd have, beautiful animals and plants, trees, birds and butterflies. And this would make our city even more attractive. And that's a big general thing that maybe could even be included in the divide. We preserve the trees and take only minimum things that are required. Maybe, I know the Edison trims them off if they're under the power lines. So let's just think that general plan be enforced strictly and that we, the people, have involvement in it and really work with you as your constituents in all the different districts to do what we would like to make our city special and unique. And again, that open space, park, and recreation element needs to be strictly enforced, and the way to do it is by designating the rest of the golf course that's left as a park, a public park, and that would really satisfy a lot of needs of people and would really bring more people to the city. Okay? Thank you. I hope I made it clear, and I have a petition that people can sign. I brought some in, so.
The last speaker of the night is Joela Valdez.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I didn't prepare anything fancy and exciting for tonight, but I did see that we are going into a special meeting to discuss the public employee performance evaluation for our city manager. I don't want to subscribe to any rumors that you guys are plotting to fire him, but I do want you guys to take in consideration what some of the residents and members of this community, how we feel about the job that Renee Bobadilla and the staff has done. There was a period in Montebello that we call the dark ages, when parades stopped, there were no more festivals, the Parks and Recs programs weren't as robust as it is now. And I've seen a huge improvement over the years under Renee's leadership, and speaking from the perspective of a C-level executive myself, and someone who has supported C-level executives, and someone who has worked with professionals at the highest level of government, I'm hard-pressed to think of someone that compares to the leadership qualities and management qualities that I've seen in Renee Bobadilla. I want you guys to take in consideration some of the things that are important to us, the people that live here. We didn't have a housing element before. Affordable housing is a huge issue to a lot of Montebello residents. The general plan finally got started. A lot of members of the community participated in that, including myself. The budget is balanced. He mitigated the pension liabilities. A lot of the business processes and permits have been streamlined. We have a very nice online portal and system to access information. Roads have been paved, especially Beach Boulevard. We were waiting for that for a long time. I think that a lot of processes are more efficient. And I'm not saying that this is all because of one person, the city manager, but he is the leadership of the team, of the staff that gets it done, and they get it done with the advice of you guys, the council. And I want to remind you guys that this is why our country, our great country, have separate branches of government. We have legislative branch, we have the executive branch, and we have the judicial branch. And we got to stop mixing the two. Scarlett Peralta, you have a history of interfering in HR matters. In June of 2020, I remember you made a post that said, "This is unacceptable with regards to the hiring of a city employee. That's unacceptable." You also said that there are council members who create an atmosphere of favoritism and intimidation in our city. I want you to take a good look at some of the actions that you've participated in and a lot of the actions that you have condoned, and ask yourself, what have you done? You said it's not enough to expect better from our leaders, we must demand it. And I'm demanding that you take a look introspectively. So tonight, when you guys go into closed session, I just want you guys to take into consideration the great job that we think Montebello is doing with you guys, a part of that team. I like the way we're moving forward. Let's continue to move forward and not backwards. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers this evening. Mr. City Attorney, if you can please read the closed session item.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. On tonight's closed session agenda, we have one item, Public Employee Performance Evaluation. This discussion is authorized under Government Code Section 54957. The title of the position is the City Manager position. That is all.
Thank you very much. We will adjourn into closed session.
Something.
We will resume the meeting of the Montebello City Council. Mr. City Attorney, can you please give a closed session report?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. With all 5 members of the City Council being present, the City Council met in closed session to discuss item number 1. The City Council discussed the matter. City Council provided direction to city staff. No final reportable action was taken. Nothing further to report.
Thank you very much. Ms. Assistant City Manager, do we have any corrections to the agenda?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item 2, the draft general plan. Is there a staff report?
Mayor, I'd like to introduce our Director of Community and Economic Development, Joseph Palumbi, who will also introduce the presenting team.
Mr. Palumbi, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Arlene. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight is an exciting time for the City of Montebello as we prepare to release the first draft of the 2040 General Plan and Downtown Specific Plan. With over 24 community meetings, surveys, and fact gathering, we have put what we've heard from the community into a living document. And our team is excited for the upcoming release of the draft General Plan and Downtown Specific Plan. And just to provide some context, the city's general plan is intended to provide a vision and framework with goals and policies to help guide the city forward. And we believe, guide it forward into a future that is rapidly changing. So as we approach future growth and the quality of life, we must take into consideration these changes. In addition to that, we believe the downtown corridor is the city's core. The goal is to establish a turnkey downtown specific plan that encourages future development and provides communities with vital resources. So with that, I will introduce Kaiser Ringwala. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and community members, it's great to be here this evening. We are at a critical point in the general planning process. As Joseph mentioned, for the last 2 years, we've been working with the community, and we now have a draft that is available for staff review, and pretty soon it'll be available for public review as well. But we are about to start the environmental documentation, which is to measure the impacts of the growth that is being projected by the general plan. Now, that's under CEQA, which is California Environmental Quality Act. We are going to start the EIR process. That process is a lengthy process and a fairly expensive process. And that is why we are coming to you one more time in presenting what we have been presenting now for over the last 6 to 9 months, which is the growth numbers and the locations where we're projecting growth to occur within Montebello. So this is a crucial time, and it's within that context that we're here before you, because we want to make sure that you're comfortable with the numbers, you're comfortable with the locations where growth is being projected. So once you are, then we can begin the process of analyzing the environmental impacts of that growth and begin to mitigate or address those environmental impacts. So I'll just go over some of the slides that I have. But again, you will be familiar with this information because we've shared this over the last 9 months. The last time we met, it was at the adoption hearing for the housing element. So a lot of information that we are going to share today is consistent and similar to that. It's just that we've moved on from that point onwards, and we now have a draft that is ready for your review and for your comments. So we're working at 2 scales. We're working at a citywide scale, and that's represented in the map on the left-hand side. And then we're doing a finer examination of the downtown through a specific plan process. The specific plan process allows us to take a deeper dive to analyze closely the physical conditions, to analyze closely the economic conditions and transportation networks, parking issues that may be present in downtown, and address those. The one difference between a general plan and the downtown specific plan is the downtown-specific plan will have a development code. So as one of the speakers earlier mentioned about setbacks, about parking, all of those things will be in the downtown-specific plan, and you will notice them. Next slide, Joseph. This is a schedule, and community members, please don't try to read this. It's too small. It's available on our website. But all we want to emphasize here is that we are running late. And we have produced the housing element, and we have HCD certify that as a compliant document, and you have adopted that. We were anticipating that taking about 3 months. That actually took over 9 months because halfway in the process, we got guidelines from HCD asking us to address affirmatively furthering housing, affordable housing in Montebello, and this is required of all cities in the state of California. That guideline itself was about 75 pages. So addressing that took a long, long time, and because we were doing this for the very first time, both the state and the cities, it required a lot of back and forth and took up a lot of our time and a lot of our resources. And that is why we were running a little late, but we're trying to make up that time throughout the process, and we'll catch up when we do the environmental documentation. The next slide, please. The general plan is an integrated process that looks at number of components within the city. It looks at, for example, the natural areas, air quality, water quality, looks at prosperity, economic development, retention of businesses, looks at promoting healthy and safe community, safe both from natural disasters as well as man-made disasters. And then creative, looking at creative aspects, arts, culture, and active, looking at parks, recreation, and healthy living. The housing element is a close component of the general plan, and it's tied in with the general plan. The beauty of doing the general plan at the same time you're doing the housing element is they're 100% compatible, 100% consistent. And that's also true with your downtown specific plan. It's 100% compatible with your long-range general plan. Next slide. It is a vision-based plan in that we have worked with the community in a number of focus group meetings that have occurred in the last 2 years, including a 4-day visioning charrette, which many of you participated in that visioning charrette. Next slide. The vision, as I can simply describe it, is looking at areas that are stable within the community and preserving those areas. There may be some areas that may require modest amount of intervention because there are certain things that are missing or are deficient, and looking to incorporate those. But then there are opportunities for where growth could occur, opportunities where redevelopment activities could be targeted. And those, as we realized through the community meetings and through working over the last 2 years, happen to be on your corridors, along your corridors in your downtown area and in some large parcels that are located along the freeway. And we see an opportunity to use green infrastructure, which is a collection of green networks of streets and walkways and trails to connect all of the resources that you have within the community. And these also include your streets. Next slide. So this is an illustrative plan of the city. Typically, general plans have a 20-year lifespan, but we went beyond 20 years and looked at a build-out scenario. Saying, what does the city look like in the next 100 years? And this may actually be more than 100 years, but what does it look like? What is the eventual end game? What is the built-out of that city? So we can work our way back in 20-year increments with general plan headed over that final goal. So the illustrative plan essentially builds off the vision, the community vision, and presents a scenario where the city could accommodate growth within its corridor, at the same time preserve and make its residential neighborhood more stronger. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that I wanted to share this evening and get you to focus on because it shows the areas where we're going to direct and target growth. And again, as I mentioned, on the left is the general plan, on the right is the housing element. The red areas on the general plan are essentially the sites that are called out in the housing element. So this is where growth will be directed in the next 8 years. These are the sites that are within your housing element projecting roughly about 5,000 units, 5,700, which is your RENA obligation from the state. The general plan is a 20-year plan, so it looks at growth that could occur within the next 20 years, and it's calling out short-term growth, which is again the 8-year threshold, to long-term growth, which could be anywhere from 20 years plus. So none of this or all of this may happen in 20 years, but it's being planned for. So you're planning for growth, you're planning for the impact, and accommodating growth as it occurs. Next slide. This is the same general plan map that you saw earlier in the previous slide with place types. As I mentioned earlier, we are contemplating growth occurring in different places within the city, and those place types are downtown. So you can see the numbers in the downtown, the units that are projected within the downtown area. You can see the units that are projected within the various corridors along the city, and then within the neighborhoods. And these neighborhoods are essentially those larger parcels that you're seeing in red. The shops at Montebello, the Metro Heights, Montebello Town Center, DePaul Center, Olympic Avenue, and Garfield Avenue. Next slide. This is a land use map that builds off the projected growth. Again, it's preserving the existing neighborhoods, protecting the existing neighborhoods, enhancing the existing neighborhoods, and then looking at the corridors in the downtown area for growth. And it talks about variety of context, variety of different characters within each of the land use districts. And what I have here is illustrations, but there is explanation within the general plan documents, the drafts that you have, that describe the character and intensity of each of these different place types, each of those different land use categories that you have within the general plan. Next slide. Another way to look at the projected growth within the city with the different land use categories. The floor area ratios are essentially a way to calculate the amount of growth that could occur within a parcel. And it allows us to, and the only reason we are doing this is because it allows us to measure the impacts. Because you want to quantify the amount of growth. Once you quantify that, you can measure what the traffic resulting from that, what the greenhouse gases resulting from that could be. So the floor area ratios are averages. And for example, in the corridor, the 0.5 is an average. We're hoping that it would be more than 0.5, or in the downtown area, 0.5. Certain sites may be 1 floor area ratio, but there might be certain sites that may not be as intense as some of the other ones. The reason we are not suggesting 1 or 2 at this point is because these sites will measure impacts. And if we measure the impacts for a larger floor area ratio, we may end up widening our streets, we may end up making adjustments to our infrastructure that may not be warranted, because this is a built-out scenario, and that is why we are looking at an average floor area ratio. And the same goes with units per acre. There might be some lots that may be over 60 to 80 acres, but majority of the lots may not be that may be 15 to 20 units per acre. So these are looking at those average numbers. When it gets to the code, however, within the downtown area, and you will see within just a few moments, I'll share with you a page from the code, we're not mentioning the densities at all. We're only regulating by height and setback. Earlier speaker mentioned that. We're not talking about, because density numbers are very blunt and they don't offer contextual development. We are interested in promoting contextual development, density through contextual development. A quick example would be an FAR of 1 could result in a 1-story building if you use the entire lot. So if this is a lot and this is FAR of 1, I can project it 1 story, cover it all up. But what if I told you I can also do an 8-story building on this lot by just covering 1/8 of this lot? That's not contextual right next to a single-family residential neighborhood. So that's what we're trying to avoid, and that's why we, in our codes, won't mention any density parameters. We'll regulate by the form of the development. Next slide.
Kaiser, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make one clarification. In the downtown corridor, there would be the potential for 2-to-1 FAR, for example, if that was something that was proposed.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
So I think you were referring to place-based zoning, right?
Yeah.
The last comment. So let's say, for example, in the downtown corridor, under the specific plan, if there was a need to do a 2-to-1 FAR on a development, that would be possible with the flexibility you just described, right?
Yes, absolutely. It would require a more urban response in that a 2-to-1 would require that you could build twice the amount of land area that you have. It may, in many cases, warrant a parking garage or a parking structure. It's a very urban development, but that is completely possible if you can pack it all up within a 4- or 5-story building, which would be allowed in the downtown setup. Okay. So we're moving on to the downtown specific plan, again, building off the general plan. What we are seeing in the downtown, what you see in the shaded areas is the boundaries of the downtown. But when we did the specific plan, we really saw the potential of the downtown being the area that is bounded by 2 major assets in your city. One that you currently are utilizing and can be enhanced even further, and the other one is perhaps a one that presents enormous opportunity. It's an untapped resource. The one on the left-hand side, on the west side, is the Montebello City Park with all of its assets, wonderful assets and the wonderful events that take place over the years. And then on the right-hand side, you have the Rio Hondo Channel, which is part of the 28-mile Emerald Necklace, providing connection to the region and an opportunity to connect the downtown to that asset. And then within this core is a walkable area. One of the speakers earlier mentioned about turning downtown into a walkable experience, not a drive-by experience. It's not just a place where you drive by, but it's a place where you drive into, you park, and you walk to various assets that are available within the downtown fabric. Next slide. Now, one of the things that we heard during the interviews, the stakeholder interviews and the community meetings is that the city was known as a city of flowers. And if we can somehow recapture that, and we saw it as an opportunity to look at the neighborhoods in Montebello, and this is just in a very initial idea that needs to be fleshed out even further, but in the general plan and in the downtown specific plan, it talks about street trees adding a character and adding a unified element within the neighborhood. So one neighborhood could have a specific street tree with a specific type of flower. Another one could have another. And this can be developed further with additional community input. But the neighborhoods, the street trees, present a unique opportunity to add identity and character within the downtown fabric. Next slide. Now, talking about walkable and creating a place, 7th Street terminates currently into a one-way street. And there's an opportunity with a parking lot right next to Bank of America to recapture that and to make that a urban plaza, urban place a place where you could have civic functions, a place where you have the Christmas tree lighting, a place that you could close to parades and variety of activities over the year. So there within the downtown that captures the essence and brings the pedestrians and celebrates civic life within Montebello. Next slide. This is the connection that I was talking to you earlier about, connecting downtown to the Rio Hondo Channel, and then revitalizing the Rio Hondo Channel with all of the development that has already been entitled along this channel. So some of the development that you're seeing that is highlighted is already entitled and is coming. And we see this as an opportunity to use development to provide that connection, to use their front yards, for example, to provide connections that would be beneficial not just to the development, but also to the city, while securing their development. So there are numerous opportunities. We are suggesting perhaps a sculpture park that steps down to the Rio Hondo Channel and connects downtown to that wonderful amenity, and then creating an entrance at the termination or at the mouth of the bridge that could serve a parade route, for example. Again, hearkening back to the old days when Whittier Boulevard was a significant corridor within the community, significant walkable corridor within the community. Next slide. So all of that is vision, and we want to make sure that within the downtown, this vision is matched with a code, a development code, because a lot of this is going to take place in the private realm. A lot of development will happen because of the partnership that you have with the private developer. And we want to make sure that we're providing them clear and precise development codes with a streamlined process. Yes, the standards are high, but if you meet those standards, you have a streamlined process available for the development. Also important is an emphasis on contextual development. We want to make sure that development that's along with your, when it steps back into the neighborhood, is contextual and meets the mass and the scale of the residential neighborhood. So we have provisions in the code that protect existing neighborhoods while attracting new development on Whittier Boulevard. Next slide, please. And this is looking at the future, perhaps beyond an 8-year threshold. But if transit comes down on Washington Boulevard, that provides an immense opportunity for certain parcels, certain key parcels along Washington Boulevard to be redeveloped in an urban fabric as well. Next slide, please. This is looking at mobility of how people move within the city, and it prioritizes pedestrian movement within the downtown area, but then also looks at first mile, last mile from that bus routes to look at existing streets and making them part of the green infrastructure that connects and provides walkable streets that connect to the nearest bus stop, or within the downtown area provides mobility hubs. These hubs are where you can have microtransit. Microtransit could be perhaps a scooter or a bicycle or a shared vehicle that takes you from your place of work that you're coming from to your home. That last mile that you're trying to accomplish within the city that connects you back into the network. And then building off the Rio Hondo Channel and looking at that as an opportunity to connect the various assets that are within the city along that corridor, but then also connect the assets that are outside the city. Because just outside the city, you have regional parks, you have a variety of amenities that you could connect to, and that opportunity is available. Next slide, please. The general plan also, and the downtown plan talks about arts and culture, we've tried to map some of the cultural assets within the city, and this will never be complete, and it will never be an updated map because it will always be outdated. You're always adding stuff But we thought this would be a good place to get a start that you can add on a variety of other facilities. We're looking at arts as and culture as a possible venue to attract economic development within the downtown, to promote cultural tourism within the downtown and the community, but to also look at education that is provided, arts education within the schools. The YMCA has a wonderful range of programs, and there are other private vendors that are providing arts education to our kids in Montebello. Cultural equity, we want to make sure that all of the residents are represented in the events that take place within the city. One of the speakers spoke about historic preservation. You currently don't have any historic preservation within the city, but the general plan gives you a start. We've already done a context survey as part of the general plan process, and we, within the code, within the downtown code, have provisions where you would protect your assets. So if you have a structure that's over 50 years, you may require a phase one. A phase one is an assessment that essentially analyzes if the structure is historic, if there is cultural significance to that structure or to that place, and protects those assets from demolition. Public art as an opportunity for energizing and activating your public spaces. And then building capacity and leadership so that this is a sustainable effort over a long period of time. Let me just briefly stop so I can catch breath. But also, I'm going to change my the mode of the presentation. I have water. And talk about the fiscal impacts. But before I do that, I'm happy to take any questions up to this point, if that's okay with the mayor and the council.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Rangwala. I will go down the line here, starting with Councilmember Melendez. Any questions or comments up to what we've seen so far?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation so far. Just some couple of questions. Did you mention there was like a one-way, the possibility of a one-way street? Was that, what street were you referring to that? Was that Whittier? Or
Council member, I was referring to 7th Street.
7th Street?
Which is not a two-way street at that point in the downtown area. And what the downtown specific plan is proposing is to close off that last segment to traffic and actually make it a pedestrian plaza that connects to the larger civic square that would happen to the north. Again, all of this is very conceptual. It involves property owners, but in this case, the city is one of the property owners that owns a portion of that frontage, so that should help.
Got it. I really like the idea of the bike trails going, that pathway into Whittier Boulevard. The Washington Boulevard, just I know it's quickly mentioned, I've been a big proponent of the Washington line. What it can do to that area, it'd be, there's great opportunity there too. I don't know if you'll touch on it or if it'll come up in the conversation, but like a parking structure, like is there different opportunities there for on Whittier Boulevard, or I don't know if you mentioned it, or if you can just.
Yes, council member, can you go back about a few slides? Yeah. 2 or 3 slides to the mobility portion. Right there. One of the things we're proposing is a park once environment, that when you get to the downtown, you park once and then you move around. But as you correctly pointed out, there may be a need for a future parking structure. One of them was mentioned earlier by a community member that would be perfect to convert into a parking structure. This is land that is owned by the city, and with the right kind of development partner, you could actually create something that would be of a community benefit, community value, where parking is, portion of the parking is public parking, but that also supports the downtown area. Besides that, we're proposing a parking district within the downtown area. The area that's shaded is the district that is being proposed as a parking district. Just to go back on the bike There are various sections within the general plan for the different streets. I would encourage you. I think your staff is going to bring you a proposal for a back master plan. Have the same consultant who's part of the team who would now take this information and expand it even further. So that's coming soon in the near future.
And Kaiser, if I may, just to further respond to Councilmember Melendez's question, we have explored and we've had communications with our transit department on a potential mobility hub that would take transportation all the way from let's just say Greenwood and Washington, where the light rail station would be, all the way up to the shops at Montebello. So we're looking at that as a mobility hub, and we want to incorporate that and including into the downtown where you see the parking structure or proposed parking structure, potential parking structure identified right on the area just south of Whittier Boulevard. All right. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Melendez. Councilmember Tamayo.
I do want to echo on the bicycle master plan, because I know actually today I had one resident that approached me asking what the city is doing with bike paths and bike trails, and how are we addressing the limited, that limited source or resource. So I echo that, and I do like the pedestrian-friendly Whittier area. My question is on the historic preservation site. So the city of Montebello does not have any historic preservation sites?
No, ma'am. Council member, you may have historic resources. You certainly have the Adobe House, that's a historic resource. You may have many more that you haven't analyzed through a survey. So the first step is to conduct a survey. So once you conduct a historic survey, what we have done through this process is to conduct a synoptic survey to just understand the fabric that you currently have. And through that synoptic survey, we have identified that there may be potential resources within the community, within Montebello. So what we have done in the downtown area is to put a protective measure, saying in the downtown, if you have a resource and you want to build, if you have a structure that's over 50 years, do a phase one to assess if this is an historic resource. But throughout the city, we would encourage a historic survey be conducted in the near future. The general plan is the start of that discussion, and the downtown specific plan has specific provisions and protections in place, but there's a lot more you can do once you further explore that. But the survey would tell you what your resources are. If you have any assets within the downtown area or within the city, or you have any districts, historic districts, that have a character-defining feature that you want to protect for the future. That would be the first step that would follow the general plan if you're further interested in preserving the historic resources and having a program. You could also follow up with once you realize there are assets within the city, you can follow up and have an historic preservation ordinance or design standards or design guidelines that talk about how that structure should be if you want to rehab that or reuse that, or if you have proximity to that structure that wants to be rebuilt, how those projects should be addressed. I think the general plan gets you. It's a first step, and it gets you along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Tamayo. Mayor Pro Tem Peralta.
Yes, just want to say thank you so far for just such an informative and comprehensive presentation. It's really great to see how we can envision Montebello and what it will take as far as council decisions to really enact this vision. And so I guess one of my questions is through the general plan, will we be able to receive policy recommendations that council can take to kind of put put this plan into action. So I know there's, for example, when speaking about public arts, we do have public art development type of policies that I know council has tried to enact here in the city, that other cities have enacted, and that allows for us to, or allows cities to move forward with putting in art in a lot of our development type of sites coming into the city. And so that's one example of a policy, and other examples of policies such as how do we make more of a walkable community. Will our general plan be able to highlight those types of policies to give council kind of those ideas and how to move forward in a direction that is able to accomplish some of these items here?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for bringing that up, because in this presentation, we're trying to cover about 500 pages. And I only hit the salient features. But you're pointing out towards the implementation of the general plan. The implementation is through policy framework. So there are about 500 or so plus policies that you will get as part of the general plan and the specific plan. And we will also identify the people who will be responsible. Some of them would be the city council and the city staff, but you will also involve members of the community that participated in the production of the general plan that would now take ownership in implementing those policies and the framework. We'll also identify the resources that are available, the grants that may be available for those policies. So you mentioned public art. There's a whole range of policies in the general plan specific to public art that we're recommending the city consider over the next few years.
Thank you. Oh, that's exciting to hear. Thank you.
And Kaiser, I just want to, the general plan it's a framework, right? It has all the elements, and maybe we cover just what the park master plan, for example, is an element of the general plan. The future bicycle plan will be an element of the general plan. All of these are incorporated to basically create the general plan, which sets the goals and policies as Kaiser just referenced. So absolutely.
And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you for, again, this presentation, Kaiser. I do want to sort of merge my colleagues' questions, mesh them together, because I live in the south side, and I think the only portion that was highlighted here in terms of the southern part of Montebello was the potential metro rail system. When speaking about art in public places, I want to see how we can highlight and let the community know more about the benefits that would come to our city in having the metro rail system come to our city, art in public places, but also the effects and or the benefits of the parking situation, because we have a horrible parking situation in the southern part of Montebello, particularly where one of the main streets where the train will potentially run through. So my question to you is, I see, again, it's beautiful to see and to imagine that this could be Montebello in the future. But again, being that I'm in the southern part of Montebello, one of the biggest topics of conversation down in the south side is the metro rail system. People are afraid of this coming through our city, but I think people just don't understand what the benefits that it would bring as it would run through our city. And again, going back to art in public places and the possibility of different developments. So if you could, or I don't know if Joe, potentially.
I'm happy to give it a kickstart, and then Joseph. There's a portion that's following my presentation that makes a case for why there should be more focus on the south side. But just to encapsulate some of the things that we're looking at on the south side, there's added new park space and new facilities that are being programmed, besides looking at Washington Boulevard and transforming that corridor with the arrival of transit, whatever that transit role, at least in the general plan, whatever role that transit takes, whether it's light rail, bus, that is, of course, up to the community to decide. But there's tremendous potential along that corridor that is untapped, and that in terms of private development that could occur there. In addition, you have the corridor, the Rio Hondo corridor that provides a linear connection to all of the amenities that currently exist. And as I mentioned earlier, the DePaul Center provides a great opportunity. The redevelopment of that site provides a great opportunity for a new park site around development, redevelopment that could occur on that parcel.
And also, I think the general plan as proposed preserves the nature of the residential community. I know that there was a lot of effort to just make sure that not only did I think the park master plan identified that area was park deficient, so that's why we identified the 6 acres at the DePaul Center, for example, that we could provide open space to the community. In addition to that, with the future light rail station at Greenwood and Washington, we envision that to be a transit-oriented development district that would attract, for example, mixed-use development in the future. That would be, I think the general plan sets the goals and policies for that to happen. So, to answer the question. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Jimenez. Jumping to what I believe Councilmember Tamayo was starting to touch on, in terms of historic preservation, I had a resident reach out to me in the last couple months asking what programs the city of Montebello had. And we don't have any. There are, as you mentioned, several historic sites, and there is no way for property owners to apply for any kind of grants or any supportive funding to rehabilitate these structures, to maintain these structures, to preserve them. In the general plan, is it possible to include in our policies a pathway for residents to apply for a house to be deemed historic? And then also, as you mentioned, in terms of connecting resources, also mentions the ways that historic preservation can be supported through different funding opportunities?
Mayor, I can tell you what I think can be done, and then I'll check with my historic preservation consultant who's part of our team. Typically, you first need to conduct a survey. And once you conduct a survey, you know where your resources are. And once you identify those resources and you have protections in place, that makes all of these other grants available. You can apply for grants to protect those resources. The Mills Act, for example, allows a property owner that has an historic resource, as an identified historic resource, they get rebates on their property tax. So there are a variety of incentives that are available, but it all begins with a survey, identifying where your resources are. Your question specifically is, well, we don't have a survey, we don't have a program, what can we do now to make those grants and those resources available in short term? And I'll check with my consultant and see if we can add something that is sort of a stopgap measure that allows you, before you conduct a survey, to maybe make this available to the property owners that may be interested. Maybe they go out on their own and identify themselves as a local historic resource that allows them to access whatever programs that you have in place that give them local benefits before they can be assigned a state designation or a national.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, there are very obvious resources like the Sanchez Adobe, but I feel there are residences within the community that date back to the times of Simon's Brickyard that have very unique architectural features that, as I mentioned, residents have approached me about wanting to preserve and looking for the support to do so, because as housing prices are right now, well, compared to 6 months ago, they're much more attractive. But this particular resident noted that it seemed like it was priced for demolition and to kind of rebuild something else on the site. And so just want to make sure that without being completely familiar with how these surveys operate, that there's also the opportunity for people that are interested and have an eye for some of these details to be able to approach the city and say, hey, I think there's an opportunity here to preserve some of our history.
Thank you for bringing that up. We'll certainly explore it.
Thank you very much.
And address it.
I also just wanted to note, since we have this slide up, a couple things, and I'm sure if you added everything that the picture would be just taken up with all kinds of information. But a couple things that are important to me in terms of Montebello history that I think are very unique is the Women's Center, which I don't believe is listed on this list. It's a facility next to Montebello Park that I believe is approaching its centennial, if not already passed. I think it's right around 2024 or 1924 that it was built. So I believe it's approaching its centennial there. If you look in Montebello Park, there is a bell lamp on a crooked post, and you'll find them all across California, signifying the Camino de Real. The Chase Bank, or former Chase Bank on Wilcox and Beverly, has a beautiful tile mural. And if you do a little bit of research on that, you'll find that Chase in the mid-20th century engaged Millard Sheets to do these beautiful murals on all of their banks. And I think it's, as an art historian myself and appreciator of public art, absolutely something that I think they've done very well to preserve. But just to list that as one of our resources. And then also, somehow signifying Vail Airfield in the south as a place where Charles Lindbergh once landed back in the 1920s, and the murals at our Metrolink station, which have a lot of very significant figures of Montebello history on the walls. It's not an often traveled site, but if you take the time to go down there and just take a look, it really connects you to Montebello history, especially this idea of the city of flowers. You'll see rose motifs all over the place. It's actually really wonderful when you take a keen eye to it.
Mayor, could you please repeat the last one? I'm sorry, I didn't capture the
Yeah, not a
address.
problem. So there was Chase Bank, Vail Airfield, and the Metrolink station.
The Charles Lindbergh was
He landed at Vail Airfield.
Vail Airfield. Yeah. Thank you. We'll certainly list them as resources within the general plan.
Thank you, much appreciated. I noted that there was just one thing here that I had a question about. If you can please describe what an enhanced sidewalk entails as opposed to a regular sidewalk. I believe I saw in the description of the downtown specific plan.
Right. So enhanced sidewalk is one that would not have any encumbrances, would be a straight walk, sometimes paved, sometimes have streetscape improvements that could be benches for people to sit. It could also have vegetation, street tree coverings. So a little more than a 4-foot sidewalk that is typically provided in many Southern California cities. But it would be a sidewalk that would be safe. It would provide comfortable walking, and perhaps even interesting, because the facades would engage the pedestrian in the downtown area.
Great. And to connect that to this idea of flowering trees along the streets, which I also think is a fantastic idea, bringing a little bit of practicality to it. I've seen these kinds of sidewalks in Big Bear and in various cities. I mean, it's wonderful when you have planters hanging from the lamps. It adds such a feeling of kind of like home and of nature, and it really kind of takes away from this whole concrete jungle kind of feel. On the opposite end, as we often must consider in our budgets, is what it takes to maintain these and clean them. And so I'm just kind of curious if the general plan also kind of entails these kinds of analyses, like if we were to go down this line, what kind of communication we're engaging with the residents. Is it the city's responsibility to clean all of these flowering trees, eventually dropping those flowers, or is it the responsibility of the property owner, and what kind of staffing we would need to make sure that this is upkept and it doesn't turn into blight?
Mr. Mayor, that's a great suggestion, and ironically, something that we were discussing with staff just recently about, creating a streetscape plan, if you will, which I think, I'll just give you sort of the way I learned this back, 20 years ago. General plan, specific plan, you get your streetscape plans. So it just kind of filters it down. So to answer the question, we could create a more specific streetscape plan for the corridor, for example, that would include landscape standards and actually activate those areas, and then create a mechanism, we would work with our Public Works Department for maintenance and just making sure that they were maintained and kept up.
Excellent, thank you.
And one of the cities we worked for recently had a street maintenance fund that was primarily geared for street trees, for the maintenance, replacing dead trees or pruning of trees or maintenance of flowers as they drop during the season. So that could be something that the city could also look at.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I mean, I'm sure my colleagues already know, but having sustainable growth and implementing sustainable practice is extremely important, because as fun as it is to cut a ribbon and celebrate a new development, leaving problems for the next councils and administrations 10, 20 years down the line often causes a lot of headaches, kind of like what we've seen with some of our systems here, and looking at these kind of perennial problems that just didn't have the funding allocated and that was required. Talking about the downtown specific plan, one thing that I didn't hear and I'm curious about is sidewalk dining and how the potential of sidewalk dining is being incorporated.
We have a special provision in the code that actually encourages sidewalk dining, and the vision talks about perhaps what we saw in a number of cities, particularly due to COVID, is there were certain streets that were closed and people brought out their dining tables and occupied some parking spaces. So the whole concept of a parklet, which is using some of the parking spaces for other purposes, such as dining, outdoor dining. Not identified any specific locations. We've left that up to the property owners coming to the city and working with the city in identifying those locations, but there's certainly provision in the specific plan that allows for that and facilitates that process to occur.
So would that entail identifying particular properties that would be suitable for dining uses, and then saying, okay, these are kind of like the areas that we're marking out for sidewalk dining, or what would that look like in the plan?
Yeah, so if I may, it would make it available to any property or commercial property located within the specific plan. It would just be dependent on that property owner coming forward and presenting a plan, and we would review it, obviously, for conformance.
Great. Talking about continuing down the path of this specific plan, one of the questions that I've had, and I'm not sure has been answered, is in terms of design standards. One of the things that I think makes a lot of communities that we look up to beautiful is consistency in color, in materials, in design. We see that for the most part within Montebello, but there's not really a strong sense of place. The colors are very neutral. They kind of bleed into surrounding communities. Have design standards been contemplated, and especially considering that the Cesar Chavez Foundation project, which is going to be 130 units and 4 stories, and I think kind of the cornerstone of the rest of the development that's going to happen along the downtown specific plan, has, as a follow-up to design standards, has that been considered in terms of how these surrounding structures are going to either take from those elements or somehow be different?
Mayor, the entire downtown specific plan, the focus is on design. It starts with the public realm, the design of the public realm, which includes the streets and the open spaces, and it looks at the frontages of how the frontages interact with those open spaces. But it doesn't stop there. It looks at how some of the other spaces within the structure can be provided, and it looks at facades, and it looks at the building masses and how those building masses could provide interest and variety within that context. So if the context happens to be Whittier Boulevard, then that's one context that is different than a side residential street, that is completely different than a rear street that backs up to a single family residence. What typically happens in development world is if you give them a parcel and you say your FAR or your density is this, they just extrude that parcel 4 stories with no regard to the context. And that creates these cookie cutter building masses that you see almost everywhere in Southern California. And what we are trying to suggest here through this downtown-specific plan is this is a different environment, one that you can certainly enhance and benefit from, but also be respectful of the context that is nearby, because there are residences that immediately abut this building. In terms of the color and specific designs, you could certainly go that far, but I would suggest that would be within the realm of a design guideline that could be explored more sort of, because it gets beyond an objective design standard. It gets into a little bit of subjective review that could be part of your planning commission or your design review committee, because you may like orange, I may like red. But it needs to be, there needs to be a certain amount of objectivity that we try to build in the standards. But we believe that if you get the basics right, if you get the basic structure right, then some play of color, some play of design. You know, the buildings are human scale and they have attractive street frontages with attractive human scale detailing that is interesting. The architecture can certainly it can benefit if you have wonderful architecture, but if you have wonderful urbanism, it will tolerate bad architecture.
Right, absolutely. And I think right now that we're having these conversations before we move way down the line and set these in stone, I think it's important to set out at least our hopes and dreams and ideals of what we would like to achieve. Because I've noticed in the illustrations that it seems to be more of a Mediterranean style design with the tiled roofs and some of the elements that you mentioned that would be facing the street. And just again, kind of going back to the Cesar Chavez Foundation project, it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But if there's a way to create like that unified presentation, it absolutely gives more of a sense of place and of destination and of being in an environment, as opposed to kind of like the jarring differences that you might see from one building to another. Just want to say, very excited about the ideas for the Rio Hondo channel. I know my colleague, Councilmember Melendez, in the past has talked about partnering with cities up and down the Emerald Necklace. I spent a lot of time down there looking at the blight and wondering how we can make more use of those spaces, especially the flood zones, and how those might be, since you can't build structures, how to make them attractive and somehow discourage blight and encourage recreation and activity. I do wonder, though, as to what is under the city's control, because at least when I've looked at the maps, it seems to go right up to the places where the bike paths would be. So I'm not sure, and I don't know if staff could speak to this, what control we have over the bike paths and creating this plan, if we would have to have communications with the city of Pico Rivera and find some kind of like way to mutually achieve some of these goals here.
Yes, if I may. These are all things that we've been discussing recently, and there's county oversight, and then there's also Army Corps of Engineers, as well as partnering up with Pico Rivera. So it would take a collective, collaborative effort, but we believe that we're putting together a strategic plan to make that happen. So,
great.
And there's a lot of, just to add to what Joseph said, there's a lot of momentum in these regional and state and national agencies that are looking at very similar concepts that we're proposing in Montebello. For example, Montclair is working on a similar, looking at their channel, and there's support from Army Corps of Engineers, there's support from the regional agencies, and there's also grant money available to study this even further. So that once we have a general plan that proposes this and talks about the benefits, you can go after some of those grants to study this further with your regional and national partners.
On that note, for example, the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy, they have funding available, but we need to have a plan, a narrative to basically tell the story. And then I think the first step would be a feasibility study to determine what the feasibility is, and we could take it from there. So.
Thank you for taking those proactive steps to make that a reality. Absolutely. Just two more questions here. One of them is affordable housing is a big issue in California, really across the United States. It is something that I think is near and dear to this council. In past conversations with the city manager, he has mentioned that the general plan would be the best way to create a policy and an ordinance for inclusionary and affordable housing. So I was just wondering what ways that is being incorporated and just ensuring that out of this process that, an ordinance is created where we can achieve those aims of providing affordable housing for our residents and for interested people that are trying to join our community.
I would just emphasize, and I'll let Joseph fill in the next part. The general plan and the housing element both prescribe policies that suggest the council adopting an inclusionary housing ordinance and density bonus ordinances to further affordable housing. And I think there's a time limit within which the council needs to act, and I think it's roughly about 2 years. Joseph?
Yes, no, we're actually in communication. We're actually in communication with the local COG so they can provide staffing for our inclusionary housing ordinance. And we're excited about bringing that before the council and planning commission in the near future.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And as a last question, and it's been kind of hard to see here on the map, but at a recent State of the City address, I picked up one of the materials that the city had, and in that pamphlet, it talked about City Hall and the properties surrounding it being up for development and for putting housing on the property. And so I was just curious, I didn't see that in our housing element, the housing element that council approved. And I'm not sure if I saw it in the general plan here. So I was just wondering if this plan continues to contemplate that or how that appeared.
Well, we're not allocating any units to the Civic Plaza. I know that's been talked as you brought it up and discussed, but it hasn't been refined. But that's not to say that that would not be ripe when you are interested in pursuing that, when the city council is interested in pursuing that. One of the things that we mentioned, and I didn't share this image, but because it's just on our drawing board, is we're contemplating civic district, and part of that civic district is where we are today, and creating civic areas, civic plazas, for example. And as you look at City Hall, and as I came in, I drove in with my vehicle, and the entire front of this civic plaza is primarily dedicated to the vehicles. So there's an opportunity for reconceptualizing how this structure, how this surrounding functions, and a part of that could be looking at housing or looking at additional uses and making more optimum use of the land that you have, the resource that you have available here, including creating a wonderful civic plaza in front of this wonderful civic building.
I was trying to find the general plan map, the proposed map, to see what the designation is for this site, but.
It's civic.
Civic?
Yeah.
So it's civic use, meaning it would, government. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, just because when I saw that, it did cause a little bit of concern, I'll be honest. With the investments that we've made in City Hall, in repairing the roofs and in green technologies, with the recent passage of the energy project and the solar panels that we'll be installing all over our property, it just seemed a little disjointed that we would imagine or reimagine the property as we're making significant investments in our facilities here. But thank you so much for entertaining my questions and comments, and I appreciate the audience and my council for entertaining them as well. And if we can please continue.
I do have a little bit more
if we can please continue
that
with
I
the
think is good
presentation.
news. But before I get into that, just as a segue to your comment, Mayor, I'm going to encourage this today, and I'm also restate it hopefully at the adoption hearing. I hope you don't see this as a one-time, saying, okay, we are not going to visit this in 20 years, because things are changing so dynamically. As we're coming out of COVID, we don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now. So I would hope that you keep this document not on the shelves, but at the front counter and constantly referring to and constantly updating it as necessary. And looking at the Civic Plaza could be one of those things, or looking at another site or another opportunity that presents itself, or looking at the FAR numbers that you have saying, hey, this is 0.5, but this development makes sense here in this circumstance. Make those exceptions, make those amendments, because this is intended to be a dynamic document, not as a one-off that you visit in 20 years. So I hope that document is not, as you've done in the past, saying, hey, 20 years, we'll visit it again. But you look at it periodically, every 2 years, 3 years, and see how it needs to be updated and kept current. So now for the good news. Next slide. A little bit of context, and some of you may have seen part of this presentation. Joe Minacosi from Urban 3, who's on the East Coast, is part of our team. He's part of his most sought after national consultant on fiscal impacts of land uses and understanding the patterns of development and their fiscal impacts. And as part of our team, he made an initial presentation to the council and the planning commission. And I'm just going to share a few slides from that presentation because I want to set it up to give you the final portion of his presentation, saying, okay, all of this growth, how is it going to impact us fiscally? What are the fiscal impacts of attracting that growth? So before I do that, just an average single-family residential value per acre is roughly about $2 million. So if you think about a typical lot in Montebello, it's about 0.3 acres, 3 units, three units on an acre. That seems about right, 750,000, maybe more in some areas, maybe less in some areas. But the average is about 2.1 million. Next slide. But if you have a 4-unit, that number goes up in Montebello to 3 million, 3.2 million. If you have a bungalow, that number goes up to 5.8 million. Next slide. And if you have a 6-unit in Montebello, that number is 7 million. Next slide. The highest value per acre is right here in your downtown, Wells Fargo building. That 1-story building is valued at $18 million per acre. And you compare that to some of the others. Intamin Bakery is valued at $8.8 million. Rio Walk, which is a new development, is valued at $5.3 million. Jade Place is valued at $13.5 million. Shops in Montebello, it's a large tract of development. It's valued at $5 million. Now you compare that to the Six-Pack. That is producing the same amount of revenue that the shops in Montebello is. So understanding the pattern of development and the fiscal impacts is an important concept and has been fundamental to how we make land use recommendations in this general plan. So as you move further, next slide, please. And Councilwoman, this is the slide that I was referring to. Understanding also where your revenues come from. For example, the southern portion of the city is more dense and is actually contributing more to your revenues than the northern portion is, because the northern portion is largely low density. The southern portion is about $1.2 million per acre compared to $500,000 per acre to the north. This makes a strong argument for why more investment should be driven on the south and more investment, certainly in infrastructure and open spaces. Next slide, please. So this is not the heights, the building heights in Montebello. This is just suggesting the value per acre for each of the site. And as you can see, shops in Montebello is producing a good amount of value, but it's nowhere close to the value that your downtown produces, that your corridors produce. It's significantly more on your corridors, on Whittier Boulevard and Beverly Boulevard and Montebello Boulevard. These boulevards are outperforming some of your larger parcels that you have on the freeway. So the pattern of development makes a difference. If you pack more on a piece of land. If you have a 1 or 2 story building in the downtown area that is modest, like the Wells Fargo, that is producing more revenues for you than a larger parcel with surrounded by parking along the freeway. Next slide. Now you may ask, and by the way, I don't need to remind you, you're already familiar, retail sales tax and property tax are 50% of your revenue. So these numbers are incredibly important as we plan for general plan and for future growth, that we make sure these land uses are fiscally positive and producing a revenue stream that is allowing you to do some of the things that you've called out in your general plan policies. So you add the retail tax and the situation remains unchanged. Your corridors are still outperforming and are doing remarkably well, particularly Whittier Boulevard and Beverly Boulevard in terms of tax per acre. Next slide. So your current total taxable value in the city is $7 billion, and that's citywide. Next slide. And of that, this is the downtown, just to orient you, Rio Hondo is on the bottom of the screen, and you're looking east at Whittier Boulevard in downtown Montebello. The existing value in downtown is $171 million. The projected value after the downtown specific plan gets built out is $509 million. Next slide. And this is the good news, that when you add all of the short-term, long-term, and midterm, short-term being 8 years and long-term being 20 plus, you're looking at almost doubling. It's an 81% increase over your current value at $5.7 billion. So in the past 100 years, the city used up its entire land, and you're now built out, almost built out at $7 billion. And in the next 20 years, leading up to our next 100 years, you're going to use a fraction of that land to realize 81% more than your base value today. That's remarkable. I mean, I think in terms of your general plan and recapitalizing on the redevelopment opportunities that are available within your city. I think that will really put you, and I don't have the regional map here, but that will put you in great strides with your regional neighbors. And I'll just stop there and next slide. And encourage you to review the documents and please provide us feedback. Again, the purpose of this meeting today was to get from you an understanding, are we ready to move on to the environmental documentation? Mayor and the council, if you say we are, we'll initiate the environmental documentation. That process roughly takes about 5 to 6 months. And once that process is done, we'll come back to you and disclose publicly the environmental impacts of the projected growth. And at that point, we will be ready for public comments. We'll address those comments and hopefully seek adoption from the Planning Commission and the City Council. I welcome any questions from the council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rangwala. Going down the line again, Councilmember Melendez, any questions or comments?
No additional questions. Just again, thank you for the presentation and for the last slides. I know we've seen them before, but very insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Tamayo.
No further questions. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Mayor Pro Tem Peralta.
Yes, I just have a comment and then one question. And so with my comment, I do just want to recognize one of our business owners that's here, the owner of Angry Horse, Nathan, for taking the time out of his day to really participate in this process and really just kind of celebrate and recognize the labor of love that he had to invest in our city prior to any general plan being created or prior to the small successes that we're seeing along that corridor, and really kind of being that catalyst along with other businesses that are now opening that are really transforming and bringing a lot of vitality, amenities, and entertainment to our city. And so with that, I would like to ask if you can just elaborate on how having an approved general plan, even if it's not fully developed, can be a way to motivate, encourage, and convince businesses such as restaurants and retail to want to come to our city. Because as we know, business owners can see or envision a grand plan. They will, hopefully, likely develop around that potential business. And so if you could just elaborate how something like this can really ignite that type of activity.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll answer that question. When you have these plans and they're current, and for example, in the downtown specific plan, we want to have a turnkey plan. So when we talk to the development community, their ears open up a little bit more than they would if they had to go through, for example, entitlements and things. So when it becomes a permitted use, right, with limited oversight, with the exception of going through all the guidelines, but when they see that we have gone this far through this effort to make this possible, definitely, the conversation is a lot easier. And we've noticed that we're getting a lot more interest, for example, and we're excited about that. So to have these plans in place, absolutely, it attracts more interest, and obviously the development world is listening. So that's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your feedback. And that concludes my comments and questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Jimenez.
No further questions, just thank you so much again for the presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you very much, Mr. Rangwala, for all the work that you've done over the last year and a half, 2 years, engaging the community and putting this plan together. I would say that I don't think I'm ready to entirely approve it today. We've had about a week and a half to review the general plan, and if we could have just one more meeting to be able to consider and really look through everything and understand it. Is there any issue with holding off one meeting?
Absolutely no, we can definitely take some more time. Would you like another special meeting or to make it part of a future council meeting action?
I think we can make it part of a future council meeting. For the most part, we've been able to ask our questions today, but just to really review the document. And is this also available for the public to review?
Yes,
Is it on the website?
Yes.
So tonight was basically the release. We will add all of the information that was presented tonight, as well as the draft documents, to our website for review.
And last question, is there an ability for the public to comment during this, like let's say during this next review period, a way for them to submit, any ideas or questions?
Absolutely. As we move into the CEQA phase, there will be a public circulation, public review of the environmental documents, and an opportunity to provide comments throughout that process as well.
Mayor, if I could perhaps try to clarify the direction that we're seeking to move this forward is much more narrower, and it's more focused. We're looking at the numbers, the growth numbers, and we're looking at the map that shows where the growth numbers, where the growth is being directed. These are maps that we have shared in the past. They haven't changed. These are the same maps that we saw at the visioning charrette, at the visioning workshop about a year ago, and we have consistently shared those maps through the housing element. You have now adopted the housing element, so that hasn't changed. So that's the portion that we are seeking your agreement on. Then there is the question of the entire document and the policies and the framework and making changes and edits, and we'll always remain open to making those. This is just a very first preliminary draft intended primarily for staff's review, so they can review it and give us comments. We can make those changes and then make it available to the public. Through the CEQA process, which is a 6-month process, these documents will be public, and the public will have numerous opportunities throughout the 6 months to comment on them and recommend changes. But the purpose of this meeting and the purpose of what we're asking is a very narrow focus. But if you certainly need more time, then please take the time. We want to make sure that we are we got your blessing before we're proceeding on the environmental documentation.
So if I may, when we study this environmentally, we use a scope, right? So whatever those FARs, if we're okay with, or we come back if you're okay with what's on the document, that's what we'll use as a baseline for the environmental analysis. So that's why it's important, because once we start, or that train starts to move forward, it's hard to go back and relook at that once we've initiated. It's costly as well, so.
I understand. And so thank you very much, Director Palumbi and Mr. Ringwallow, for that clarification. With that understanding, I'll withdraw my request that this be continued to another meeting. And I will ask my colleagues if there is a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
I have a question. I
Yes.
apologize. Just question. In the agenda, it says receive and file. Is this just a receive and file, or is this supposed to be approved tonight?
I believe it's both a receive and file, and as Mr.
Mayor, it's
Ringwallow is
receive and
indicating.
file. We just wanted to use this as an opportunity to provide you an update, but also tell you we're about to begin this process. And it's a very lengthy process and one that's exhaustive in its review. So we wanted to just check in with you, and that's essentially what we're doing. We don't need a motion, and we just, you have to make that. If you have any concerns with the numbers that we are recommending and the locations we are recommending, which we have shared for the last 9 months.
Ms. Salazar, then do we need, because I've also heard the phrase that we're looking for direction to move forward with these numbers, do we need to make a motion to approve that?
Well, at this point, the receive and file is essentially what we need in order to go to the next step.
Okay, so do we need a motion for that receive and file?
I don't believe so.
We generally don't, Mr. Mayor, but it is a custom to make a motion, for the record.
Yeah, and I think just to make sure everything's clean and we're all on the same page, I believe there was, Ms. Peralta, do you have any other questions? I believe that there's a motion by Councilmember Jimenez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second by Mayor Pro Tem Peralta. Ms. Fernandez, can we please take roll?
Councilmember Melendez,
Aye.
Councilmember Tamayo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Peralta,
Aye.
Councilmember Jimenez,
Aye.
and Mayor Torres.
Aye.
I'd like to make a comment, Mayor.
Sure, Ms.
If I may. I'd like to commend the city council for moving in this direction. The current general plan we have is in 1973, and our goal as staff is to get it done by the end of 2023, so we can say it took us 50 years, but it's a really good plan. And I say that wholeheartedly because it's taken close to 2 years to get here. It's incredibly comprehensive. There's a lot of data. I would like to acknowledge Joe and his team. I see Matt Ramos is here, the deputy director, and Monica Mercado, she's here. She's our housing planning manager, excuse me. And Jose is here as well. And there's a lot of, I know we alluded to it, but all the other plans that council has been very gracious to approve, which includes the park master plan, facilities master plan, all those other plans we've talked to you about before. This is the Bible of which those plans live. And so I just want to acknowledge council for really being progressive for doing this. It's a lot of work and a lot of detail, and I just wanted to express our appreciation from staff, and I wanted to also congratulate staff to get this far. And I know our consultant, he's been amazing, and he's been very understanding of the different roads we keep putting him on, but we really appreciate everyone's commitment, the community, and of course our business community too. So I just wanted to say congratulations, because this is a big milestone for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. This has absolutely been a week of celebrating milestones, as we had the groundbreaking for Topgolf yesterday. And Mr. Palumbi, to echo Ms. Salazar's comments, thank you so much to you and your team for all the work that you've done on this as well. This really is, unfortunately, once in a several decade process, but very happy to be at this point and part of this decision-making process. With congratulations all around, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Is there a second?
I second.
And we are adjourned at 8:14 p.m.